So a big thank you to everyone who voted to select the best presentation of this year's CAMDA. As always, there is a trophy for the winner to take home. And as always, the competition is tight. So there were 4 presentations that all scored very highly. And it was only by a few points that the winner actually won. I will start from the end. So normally we highlight the 3 best presentations. As we have a tie in between, we're actually having an additional 4th presentation here that is very close in terms of total points that we would like to award with an honorary mention. And that is Jung-Hoon Oh from the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. So that will basically be the honorary mention or shifted rank 3. Are you here? Please come on the stage. Then the tied 2nd prize goes to Ihor Stepanov from the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, who unfortunately cannot be here in presence today, and Xiangpyo Shan from Stanford University, who has also, I think, been presenting remotely. Is this correct? Mm-hmm. So they will have to receive their honors remotely as well. Mm-hmm. I much hope that in the future we can move to an all-person meeting again. And last but not least, of course, the winner from this year is Yeon-Young Kim from the Gwangju Institute of Science and Technology of South Korea. Is the speaker here? Please do come on the stage. I should say all 4 awardees are invited to present highlights from their work at the ICB Academy Talks. So we will be in touch with you so that you can present your work to the ICB Academy members. And the trophy that we give the winner to take home is usually something with strong connections to the local venue where we are. Now, Madison is renowned for its beer, its cheese, and its pink flamingos. So we were originally thinking of giving a pink flamingo until we learned that they're 1.5 meters high. So no pink flamingo, I'm sorry. Beer and cheese in their natural form are hard to take home. So what we decided instead was to have a trophy that is cheese related, and that I am told the locals very proudly wear for all national events and sporting events. And it's kind of a big cheese, which is kind of matching, because if you're a good researcher, you're a big cheese in the field. And this is actually a hat. So you can proudly wear that as the big cheese of CAMDA 2022. We know it's unconventional, but we hope that you wear it proudly as a sign of your first prize at CAMDA 2022. And I should say, the last year we had this in person. We actually had an award in Chicago, and for that there was also a hat, and it was an Al Capone hat. So at least you're not associated with syndicated crime. So thank you for coming. Thank you for voting. I hope you had a fantastic time. To close out on the session, we will still have something called the CAMDA Cafe, where we will be discussing potential contest data sets and ways forward for the conference in the next year. And we definitely hope to see you all around. Okay. Are we doing with the break now? Right? Do we have a break now, or?
No, I mean we have plenty of time, yeah?
Okay. Yes. Oh, we should have a photo.
Yeah.
Daj kamtę na górę, żeby była.
Chociaż, a uczes.
Na drugą stronę. Ja.
A czekaj, jeszcze tylko na stronę.
And Wei-Shang should also come up, because you've also been also we will take a photo for the press.
No.
Okay. Yes. Straight in your eyes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we searched for a long time. We wanted to be really passionate about it.
You're going to stay with us.
So you would land right here.
Not trophy for me?
No, just for the first prize. We no flamingos.
Okay. But can I put this in my CV?
Of course, of course. It will also show up on the CAMDA website.
Okay.
For the ICB website, we're again only allowed one person, so that
Okay.
you, but
Okay.
all four of you will get to present their work at the ICB Academy.
Okay.
We look forward to it.
Okay. So when is that?
This is to be arranged with Powell. They have slots throughout the year,
Okay.
so you can decide what date is good for you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So that.
That is good.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So are you moderating the cafe?
Sorry?
Are you moderating the cafe?
I mean, this is all us three.
Okay. All right. My proposal wants to come out as well.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing.
Wants to come out as well.
Yeah, sure.
Well, we'll have a discussion amongst us. People here to sit. Let's talk 15 minutes about possible ideas. What is that idea? Yeah, please, have a seat. We have two microphones here. I will stand. Okay. Yes, because I'm fat. So what we do here at the end of the session is just have a chat about where the conference is heading in terms of future data sets and future challenges. And we're very much looking forward to your thoughts, comments, feedback, criticism, ideas on your end. If they're basically, CAMDA is always looking for big challenges, complex data sets, often open-ended challenges where we don't know what the answer is. So saying this is a large complex data set, an important question, and can we learn more about this is a perfect legitimate question. So this doesn't have to be a challenge where we know the answer, where you can calculate an F1 score. We've traditionally often also had open-ended challenges. So in terms of what we were thinking of for next year, there has been a cancer data integration challenge where we have had read level data for 3 cancers, Pavel, is that right? 3 cancers. And we've had read level data, which turns out that a large part of these reads do not align to the human standard reference genome, but they align to genes that are elsewhere. So that is a test case for doing personalized medicine beyond the human standard reference genome and trying to see whether we can either understand or make better survival time predictions or whatever using information about gene activity that is not on the standard human reference genome. And we've had this challenge for a couple of years, and very few people have stepped up to the task because your standard pipelines usually don't work. So you can't just take your standard pipeline, run it, and then do your standard machine learning algorithm because a good part of these reads won't map to the human reference. So what we're planning to do is make this task a bit easier by pre-processing the data, determining an extended transcriptome that has genes that are not in the human reference genome, to then allow people to try and mine this data and do something interesting with it without having to go through the sequencing part of the task. So we will probably provide this at the end of this year for a challenge next year that's again is going into cancer. Pavel, do you want to say a little bit about metagenomics options?
In my talk, I was summarizing what was the challenge, metagenomic challenge coming from the MetaSub for the first few years when we were investigating whether we can trace from where sample is coming from. But of course, those data are way, so they are. I think if you play, then this happening will talk.
No, I don't want that. So how do I get the slide up? Okay,
But you can find way more starting those data, and something which is very important in the past years, and now during the pandemic situation, it might even speed up, is the antimicrobial resistance. And it spreads not only the issue of identification in the clinical sample, but also the identification in the environment. So what we are thinking about is just to pair the data, which are coming from both.
Sorry, let me stop this.
Hospital isolates.
This is the evolution of all the
Sorry, you go.
And connected locations in the environment to be able to track and collocate the specific antimicrobial resistance markers. So we will be mostly based on the metasub data, but we also are investigating the possibility to add not only the city specific, but also the data from wider from the environment, like from the Earth Microbiome Project 500. So this would be the environmental component. We are also talking now with one company to get access to the isolates, hospital isolates with the phenotypes about the resistance. And I hope that this negotiation and discussion will finalize within the next 1 to 2 months. So similarly, right after the summer, we could probably combine those data and make the challenge available. However, if anybody of you is aware about other data which we could add to those, in case of the tracking, the presence of the antimicrobial resistance, but also how it's spreading. So the new mechanism of spread, then of course it will be even more than happy to discuss these options. So this is from the metagenomic side.
Yeah, I'd just like to bring up a couple of options that we discussed in this conference. One is what came up from our big cheese presenter, Jung-Yang Kim, on the drug-drug interaction for toxicity. As you can see on this slide from Dr. Dopaso, from 2014, the CAMDA challenges included a collaboration with NCPR, National Center for Toxicity Research of the FDA, trying to predict toxicity of drugs. And that will run through pretty much the next few years, and that got evolved into this literature mining for drug toxicity. So the drug-drug interaction in terms of toxicity prediction is one of those things that we're quite interested in, and we hope that we'll get a chance to follow up with Jung-Yang and Dr. Placer in NCI, who showed some interest afterwards, and see whether we can get some of the data sets that he mentioned during the QA session ready by November, so we can potentially leverage that with the track record on toxicity of CAMDA. So that's one idea that came up. Another that we've been discussing is that if you look further back 2006, 2007, there was a challenge trying to unsolve this mystery of chronic fatigue syndrome, and that was a collaboration with the Center for Disease Control, and this became a more timely issue, as we all know, because of the non-COVID situation. So the question is, with the coming of the new data sets, whether we could have the data sets available and have a community challenge to try to solve this, look into this mystery of long COVID and potentially ME/CFS. So the question is just how much interest we can gather from this community and whether we can get data sets ready for this challenge find the number.
If I recall, the 2006 and 2007 data sets were one of the very first well-advertised data sets that were actually multimodal. So there was both transcript expression, gene transcript expression, protein expression, and other molecular tracks. But at that time, technologically, the profiles, particularly on the protein side, were rather poor. So it is to be expected that the data that Professor Xiao will compile will be of a much larger and better quality. So even though some insights got out from the 2006 and 2007 challenges, we would be quite hopeful that the new data sets would allow a much more powerful analysis. So those are more or less the ideas on this end. On the literature side, there have been no further discussions on how to proceed. So this is typically the point where we're very grateful for any comments or thoughts from your end to take on board in the planning of the coming years. If there are no comments at all from your end, we'll just go home, mull things over, and try to construct a good set of challenges for everyone in the coming year.
Maybe we'll throw some ideas.
Please.
For discussion. So
Yeah.
I mean, like the project we are doing with like metadata. So for example, one interesting aspect to be like, I don't know if that's in mind, like natural processing, like natural language processing algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, the ground truth, it's not sometimes can be obtained like manually. For example, in this case, if you think about like inferring metadata from the publications, if you manually prepare the gold standard, right? So that's the gold standard. You can keep the challenge of writing a proper machine learning or whatever natural language processing algorithm to extract that from the data mining, like literature.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's one idea. And actually, another comment was in terms of the data. Did you ever track like how many publications where it's just curious? Like that's a lot of data sets, right? Let's read a lot of effort and so on. Did you track how much did people use it beyond CAMDA? Like, or did it stop?
Well, actually, many of these data sets were public already before they were published at CAMDA. And the take-up by CAMDA gave them, if you like, a second and third life. Because typically when a large data set gets published, there's the seminal publication that brings out the data. There's a big paper in Nature or wherever, and then no one ever looks at it because they're not going to get into Nature with it, right? And so this CAMDA kind of changes that because we don't just pick single such data sets, but we collect interesting compilations together with specific challenges that inspire people. And then suddenly, when you have 5 or 10 teams working on this and publishing, that generates new interest and moves things forward. And some of these data sets have been around for quite a while, both at CAMDA and elsewhere, and others have been with us just very briefly. So it varies is the short answer. Some of the data sets that we introduced at CAMDA have suffered the same fate that most data sets that are on humans suffer. For instance, we had a neuroblastoma data set in collaboration with Professor Fischer from Cologne, from Feld. That was also used as part of the FDA 6C studies. And the limitation there is if you wanted to have the read data, every scientist needed to have a separate agreement with the University of Cologne, go through the legal department, yada, yada, yada. And a lot of people just move on to something else. So yes, people worked on the data that they could easily access through CAMDA, but building on this is then sometimes limited simply by privacy regulations and so on.
Great.
So your comment regarding building a ground truth, can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, so if you think about like the problem of like metadata, right? Like what I presented in the talks of the metadata accompanying papers is incomplete. And one reason it's incomplete because the metadata is mentioned in text of the publication rather than in like the file.
Yes.
So there is this gap. And then I think it's an open question to what degree we can infer the metadata, the phenotypes from the text. Right, so the ground truth is actually can be prepared by reading the papers, right? Manually, like by whatever the team of volunteers or something like that. And that's your ground truth from one hand, which is extracted manually, and from other hands you have like PDFs or whatever, it's like files of the publication, right? And then you apply some like natural language processing algorithms to extract from the text, unstructured text, and then you compare to what is the truth which you can do.
Do you have any experience in the effort required to do that? I mean, crowdsourcing something
you mean like
or
to sample the ground truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing that. I think we did. We already have some results like across 50 studies or so. So that's an ongoing project.
Okay.
So
Well, if it would be interesting for you to throw this at CAMDA to see how people's algorithms do on that ground truth, that would be interesting.
Yeah, we're happy to share because, and actually on the same note, I mean, similar note, like I think, so you mentioned that like the interest, I mean, some challenges with interest, right? Like to participate in the challenges and so, right? Like you're trying to mitigate. So I think like one idea is to think about and with the lines of benchmarking, right? Because essentially that's challenges and benchmarking is kind of similar in the sense that in the challenge you're developing your own tool or combining tools, right? As the benchmarking, you're benchmarking existing tools, right? So which typically most straightforward to do. So, but that's the ground truth is kind of the same. So what I'm saying is like one idea, like even for this project, is like combine both, right? Combine the results that people produce as they develop the tools plus existing tools, and that's a great ground way, like a base for the benchmarking eventually to be done, right? So I'm saying that that can be a nice framework to do that, or to think like that.
Yeah,
as one of the outcomes.
As soon as you have a reference benchmark, you can assess both existing and future tools, of course.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying.
I mean, your comment regarding the metadata is really interesting, and I think it's also quite close to some of the generic questions in standardization in context of also the nice keynote by Lynn. And actually, if you have any comments, Lynn, regarding how to compile ground truth or how to create large-scale, high-quality data sets that could be used as a reference in competitions like these, or what would be good scenarios to test automated tools that help with this task. I'd love to hear your thoughts, actually. Thank you.
So yeah, I think we'd have to follow up more on the data sets, thinking about what we use. But
Yeah.
I think part of a future challenge could be some of the very biases I talked about in my presentation. But thinking about how could machine learning inform better interpretation of the data. So we can't always get the cleanest data reported. People make mistakes. There's fuzziness in there. So what if we could use machine learning and that very fuzziness to improve the outcomes by realizing where it is, realizing where that geographic location is misspelled or misplaced, realizing where the disease name is misrepresented or the host name. Pick 5-6 categories of key data and clean them up. Now you're not cleaning in what's in the repositories, you're cleaning it up for the analysis. So identify all those gotchas, and then that could be something that could be incorporated into various algorithms afterwards, where it could actually, then we could test, is the plain data by itself, what outcomes we get, and then on those key factors, what do we get after clean them? So we can start incorporating all those variabilities that we know are in that data, and see if we can actually algorithmically clean it. Because we can't feasibly go back. We've all talked this many times. There's a lot of data that's already been submitted. We can't clean it. They don't have resources to do it. And I don't think we ever will go back. But what if algorithmically we can tackle this challenge, which is a massive problem for our data analysis? That's one thing I would propose.
Great. So in line with your intro sentence, we need to think and go back to the data sets. We would love your input on this. So if you say, from my experience, this has been a key data cleanup challenge. Here's now the data as we think they're cleaned up. Can you, from the raw data, reproduce this, or can you do better by some external measure? That would all be things that you could take up.
Yeah, there's been a number that are published jamborees that have happened on the metadata side, where communities have come together and said, we're going to look through these papers, we're going to pull out and clean up the data, and then here's X data afterwards. Yeah. But I don't think they've been, like, the next step, taking that and making that part of the algorithm development.
Right.
So I think we can pull out some of those from various publications that already exist.
That would be fantastic. And we would have a prior and a posterior state and say, can you do this algorithmically?
Yeah.
maybe we release part of the data set to develop, and on the other we test, or
Yeah, I
maybe we
know.
do a transfer learning challenge where you learn it in one context and then apply it in another. These are all open in a way.
Yeah, I know the built environment, and certainly that community has done some. EBI did one with the ENVO, the environmental ontology, and that was a meeting where they did curation. They improved the representation of the data. But then could we take that one step further and learn from what they did? And then take wherever those papers are that are out there and then have that part of the learning tool. And I mean, it could change the way we do data interpretation entirely. Imagine we could go back through all those data sets by learning about, because like errors are fairly common. Like the ones I represented, I think we could categorize them and have a laundry list going forward, and it can learn from the errors. A space missing, a slight misrepresentation in spelling. I don't think they're so out of scope that we couldn't figure them out and categorize them. And then I think that the data analysis could be quite interesting.
If the data sets are large enough, you might even find synonyms automatically in feature space without someone first telling the algorithm that these things should be synonyms, right?
Yeah, when people mentioned ontologies and standards throughout this session, we could utilize them wherever they fit in that area, and they will have synonyms in them. They'll have related data, the hierarchies of these ontologies as well. Maybe someone writes an osteosarcoma, but maybe you could walk up and down the tree of those cancers and see what's related, and then use that information, that semantic information, to actually inform. I'm not sure if anyone's doing that semantic steps to inform the connections.
And in terms of data, do you think it would be more interesting or more feasible to do this on something like, I don't know, PubMed abstracts and titles, or rather on something like metadata to molecular profiles in databases? Or what type of data do you think lend themselves to this based on what you know about what data is available and what has been done already?
I think the abstracts would get you to key in on what the data sets that are available, but those data sets are going to be in supplementary files.
Right.
I don't think we're going to we'll find the starting point in the abstracts, but I think we're going to have to, and I think we can pull them out of the papers and in the submissions.
Would you be happy for us to reach out to have a discussion after the conference to try and find something?
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.